2, 3, 4.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Power of Music Thinking. My name is Christoph Zürn, and this is the podcast for people with a musical heart and a wicked job. We're looking for stories, insights and tools from the big world of music to inspire leaders and followers to listen, tune, play and perform in whatever field you're operating.
From the wild punk scene in New York and London of the 70s to a sound healing practice in Los Angeles, my guest today is Jennifer Palladino, also called Dr. Jen, a doctor of chiropractic, the regional director of the U-Rock Foundation, and a holistic health facilitator connecting mind, body, and spirit with chiropractic sound therapy. Her musical experiences span from being a young performer wrangler at the American Ballet Theatre, while Mikhail Baryshnikov was artistic director, to working in the music industry and a mastering studio in New York, to the legendary Marquee Club in London, where she made friends with members of the punk and new wave scene. We talk about a rich life in music, from the impact of the Beatles, the power of punk, and an orchestra of instruments that she uses in her sound healing practice. Jennifer shares with us some music hacks, like how different frequencies resonate with our body, which contains 75% of water, and how she uses tuning forks with slightly different frequencies to produce binaural sounds in a sound bathing session. And she explains the full moon performances she's doing as the sound healers on the Hollywood Cemetery, where Rodolfo Valentino and Judy Garland rest. Okay, let's dive into it. Welcome, Dr. Jen. Welcome to the Power of Music Thinking.
Thank you so much for having me, Christoph. It's a pleasure.
Okay, so let's start with the beautiful question of music thinking. What was your first sonic experience or record album or concert performance that had an impact on you?
I think a lot of people can relate to this. I grew up in New York and in Brooklyn. I was born in Brooklyn. And in 1963, 64, what was it all about? The Beatles. And so I was 3 years old. But my exposure to the music was interesting. My mom was very... even though she's pretty proper, she was very open. And, in the 60s at that time, it was changing. Things were changing, especially that early in the 60s. But she allowed my sister and I, my sister was 2 years older than me, to listen to all the Beatles we wanted. And of course, that branched out from there. But I remember going to the movie theater and seeing A Hard Day's Night, and my dad had to get up and leave because it was too intense with all the girls screaming. And I clearly remember watching the Beatles the first time they were on Ed Sullivan. That was so impactful. And when I think of Beatle music now, it's a happy place for me. And I'm sure, like I said, a lot of people can relate. So that was it.
And it was New York. So it's really, wow, big
Intense. City.
And
Yes.
also for them, it was it the first time that they played in the US?
Yes, I think, the first time was Shea Stadium. Actually they were on Ed Sullivan. But from there, I think they went on tour. But in that mix was Shea Stadium. We were too little to go. But I wish, still heavy influence. I had my little John Lennon doll that was kind of rubber with doll hair. And we we took him into the bathtub with us. I mean, it was I always define myself as a Beatle baby. I was a Beatle baby.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing. And also, did you also follow them later when they went into, I just saw a documentary where they've been in India and all these influences. Did you follow this?
Yes, actually, what happened was my mom's brother was 13 years older than me, so he wasn't like much older, but he was still, at that time, that age where the influence was huge on he and his generation, and so of course he would turn us on as little kids. He would bring us all the albums. He would buy 2 and give us 1, and so.
Wow.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And, I think when growing up with the Beatles, you turned to a lot of that music. It was so impressive. And I guess was having such an impact in the world. And you're even on your own world. So you turn to the Beatle music a lot through your emotions, through your happiness, your sadness. I had a friend who, when I was 9 years old, she and her brother and her sister died in a fire. And I turned to the Beatle music because I don't know what I would have done emotionally if I didn't have that music to bring me through. And another note is, the reason my mom was so encouraging for us to listen to that music, because it was such happy music, was because my dad was suffering with a mental illness, and it got very intense around the house. So she would divert our attention onto the music and keep us out of that mix. So I really, and still do, turn to Beatle music for a lot of emotional connection.
Yeah, I also hear the health aspect, and that's So, Dr. Jen, I have to say, what do you do for a living, and who are you? Tell us a little bit more about what you do and your story.
Well, I'm a doctor of chiropractic in private practice for 33 years in Southern California, and I'm also a sound healer. I use sound with my patients to address a multitude of issues, whether it's depression, anxiety, or a physical issue like temporomandibular, jaw problems, migraines, all sorts of because physical illness and physical manifestations come from somewhere, not just the body. A lot of times it's mind provoked, and our thoughts and emotions are very much integrated with what we experience physically. So I've noticed that over time, and I thought, okay, let's address body, mind, and spirit. And that's why I brought the sound healing into the practice.
Wow. And how do you do this? So what would be a typical healing session? By the way, it pops in my mind when we talk about healthcare, it's about health, it's about the hospital, but in sound, it's already healing. So what do you heal? So I really would be, I'm really curious in how does it work, and how long are you doing your treatment?
Okay, I'll start with an example. I have a patient, lovely gal, and she was in a car accident when she was pregnant, and so not only did she hurt her back and neck, but the trauma was, of course she was pregnant and she experienced such a fright. So not only did I address her physical issues through chiropractic, physical therapy, I do some different types of technique, chiropractic technique. I do some non-force technique called sacro-occipital technique, and I use
What is it?
Sacro-occipital technique.
Yeah.
It's what happens in the neck and in the cranium. You can correspond it to the lower aspects of the lumbar or the low back and sacrum. So there's a lot of balancing that goes on there. A lot of nerve restoration. You're trying to really untorque the body and balance it, and there's a lot of non-force techniques that I use along with the traditional manipulation. So I worked certainly on those physical aspects of her and her condition, but the stress and the anxiety was so outrageous that even though she had already given birth to her child was, 2 years old, she was still experiencing this deep, deep fear. So what I do is sometimes I'll separate the treatment and I'll just do the physical aspect, and then we'll do the sound healing. And it's a one-on-one sound healing. I have an orchestra of instruments, gongs, sets of Tibetan bowls, bells, chimes, crystal bowls, drums, ocean drums, and kochi chimes, and you name it. It's
you name it, literally.
But also, too, Christoph, a really important part of the one-on-one sound healing, I use sets of tuning forks. And because with the tuning forks, you can really take that patient down through the brain states. So just a little note about brain state frequencies. Like you and I are talking here. So we're engaged. We're in that. Our brain has a frequency of 13 to 30 hertz. But when someone either meditates or goes through a sound healing, you want to bring those brain states down, the frequency down into, like, for example, alpha, which is 8 to 12 hertz, or theta, which is 4 to 8 hertz. By bringing that person's brain state down right above sleep, you can really influence their sense of peace. It's almost like a guided meditation. It's almost like someone holding your hand and taking you there through the instrumentation, which is great. But the I've found with my patients, because I do group sound healings too, and you really can't get as deep as a one-on-one with tuning forks, and that's real difficult to do when you have a group of could be 50, 60 people. But a one-on-one,
so many.
A one-on-one using those sets of tuning forks, and they range from an endocrine set, so your hormonal organs, there's a frequency of each hormonal organ, and you can use those tuning forks to address that aspect.
How do you do this? Do you hit the fork and then you come closer? And by the way, second question is, you just talked about 13 to 30 hertz, and then you try to bring it down from 8 to 12, but that's a very, very low sound.
Well, it's not so much sound, but it's a brain state. So it's how the brain, the frequency of the brain. So when we go into sleep with delta, we're in a delta brain state, and that's less than 4 hertz. Okay. But you really want to keep that person, that patient, their brain state right above that, because in that frequency, you can really influence a person. I mean, it's a subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is extremely, influential. You can really influence yourself, change habits, change how you think. And so by bringing them, to me, that's a very vulnerable state.
Yes.
So my room is very quiet, very protected, quiet from outside sound, which can sometimes get difficult. But that being said, I have the patient set up in a couple of ways. Either they're lying face up or face down on the chiropractic table, because I have a special sound room where I have another chiropractic table. And either that or I have them on the floor with, I call the crown of Tibetans. All the Tibetan bowls around their heads specifically placed. Sometimes I'll put the bowls on the body. I also use crystals, palm stones that they hold. But with the tuning forks, I position myself above the head of the patient, and I use a tuning fork that is a constant, and then I bring in the other tuning forks, and I take them down with each tap, and then I switch the tuning fork to the next one lower, and I'll bring it, and I'll cross and bring the tuning forks back and forth on different sides of their head. So then this way, it's almost like, I don't know, binaural beats. You get the binaural beats, and you can.
But maybe not all listeners know what binaural beats are. Maybe you can explain it.
Well, with tuning forks, there's one tuning fork with, say, a frequency of, just for argument's sake, 50, and another tuning fork with a frequency of 55. Yeah. So the 50 and the 55, it cancels out the 50, and you get a 5 hertz.
And do you get then some kind of wobbly sound, or just a different sound?
It's hard to explain. I think it's almost like a wobbly sound, but that frequency back and forth where you cancel out, and then you have that basic, can take you into that theta, because it's 5 hertz, the difference. So it can take you into that theta. And these sets are all designed to really bring that person into a state of mind where they're completely calm, they're a bit vulnerable, but I'm there to protect them. I make sure that the peace is very deep. A lot of times too, even when I go to sound baths, group sound baths, and I experience that, I find that I'm guarded. I protect myself, because it's almost like this thing where you're worried about being that vulnerable. And so sometimes I go so deep, and then I like this, because I realize, oh my gosh, I have to stay. Where am I? So, but I try and make a very relaxing, protective environment for that patient. Now, what's interesting, which I found, which no one had told me about before this experience of treating patients through sound, was more than one occasion I've had patients tell me that they've had visitations from passed on relatives, from beings who they didn't recognize, messages that they got from these spirits, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
I'm just a facilitator, so I don't judge.
Could you explain it, how this comes, what this could be?
I can maybe explain it with an example. I had a patient, a fella, he was a guy, he was a drummer. So he was really agitated, and he couldn't sit still without tapping, and I'm like, wow, okay, let's see what I can do here, because I wasn't sure that he would respond in a positive way,
Yeah.
So I told him, I said, you know what? I said, you'll sense me around the room, but don't even worry about that. This is for your own experience. So just relax and enjoy. So I went through the sound healing. I used the tuning forks. I used the bowls. I used my gongs. And afterwards, I brought him out very gently, because that's the last thing you want to do after being so deep in that meditative state, is like to jump up, right? So I brought him out very gently, and he sat up and he said, "That was interesting." I said, "Oh?" He says, "Yes." He said, I was met by this male being. He says, I didn't recognize him. He didn't look familiar. I didn't know him, but he seemed to have known me. And I said to him, "What is the meaning of all this?" And the being, or the spirit, said, "It's utilization of time. How you utilize your time on earth." Now, that could have been just a message for him, but he said then he was met by a female spirit joining him. And it was a very, I guess, relaxing, opening up. And then his father joined him in this. Now, his dad had just passed away 1 year and 1 day before we did this session. So he came out and he says, "I recognize my father, but I didn't recognize these other two beings." A week later, Christoph, his mom came to me for a session because he said it was wonderful. So she came to me for a session, and she told me this. She said, "I never shared this with my son, but he had 2 siblings that died, a sister and a brother."
Oh.
And I said to her, maybe it's time you share this. So in that hindsight, apparently it was these spirits of his siblings, and then his father joined. So that was really kind of, to me, a profound experience when it comes to sound healing, and, I suppose meeting your loved ones.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I want to say story, but I don't know if it's a story. It's a beautiful experience.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. And also I can feel, so in the way you explain the sound bathing, I really can nearly literally feel. So it's around you. And we often say that sound is touching from a distance. So you don't touch people like with a massage or as a chiropractor to manipulate someone. So sound is touching from a distance and maybe very soft, and gives also literally space to be.
Yes. Well, they say, every single organ in our body, it has been mapped out and has a frequency. So I find that very interesting. I mean, down to the smallest of structures in our body, each one has a frequency. So it makes sense why music moves us.
Yeah.
Especially because of, we're made up of 75% water, and we flow. It's funny how people gravitate toward what they find heals. Very interesting stuff. I also do a couple of monthly group sessions. I do one at a yoga studio, a local yoga studio, and it's amazing how many people have never experienced a sound bath, never experienced sound healing, and it's my pleasure when they say, "Oh, just show me hands. Is this your first?" And so many hands go up, and I'm so pleased, because my experience when I first was drawn to a sound healing, it was like it was like going to a concert. You got so excited.
Ah.
You couldn't wait to get there just to lie down and feel all these sounds affect your body so, and bring you into wonderful places and sometimes not wonderful. So I had an experience where, like I said, for me, I'm guarded. I'm trying to get through this and I'm guarded. And the gongs were played. And these gongs, I mean, this woman has, like, I trained with her. She must have close to 50 gongs. I'm not kidding.
Wow.
Massive gongs. It's where gong work is very much profound than the other work with bells and chimes and bowls. This gal uses gongs and crystal bowls, and where it takes you is it's like a trip. It's like I don't want to say a drug trip, but it's like a drug trip.
Yeah.
Better because it's your brain doing the work.
Right.
It's the outside influence. It's quote unquote music or sound. But
I'm just thinking about when nowadays younger people go to, let's say, a rave or to an electronic dance festival, and I also know this from my girls, that they sometimes take something, and I always feel like, oh, is this good? Is this control? So the typical parents, father, mother questions, and I think, well, maybe this would be a good idea to start with a sound bath and then just get into it. Oh, wow, that's a good idea. Maybe someone can pick it from us.
You know what would be a great idea is to find some sound bath near you, Christoph, and have your girls go and then come back and tell you their experience with it. Because, as long as you make it and say to them, just don't do anything. What is your personal feeling without any other outside influence, right? Any drugs or whatever, enhancers, what have you, to see what they think. Because my group keeps getting bigger and bigger. People are hearing about sound baths and sound healings, and they're flocking because everybody wants to calm down. Everybody needs to relax and to get rid of stress. These are the best stress healers. Yeah. Sound baths. I also do this. I'm part of an ensemble with this fabulous group of sound healers at Hollywood Forever Cemetery out here in Hollywood, California. We have
you play at the Hollywood Cemetery.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. I have to say though, this cemetery is very unusual because they have crazy great events. There's so many famous people from old Hollywood and everybody up to, Johnny and Dee Dee Ramone from the Ramones and Chris Cornell from Soundgarden, and all these actors, and a lot of people are buried at Hollywood Forever Cemetery. And I guess as of like 35 years ago, the new owners decided, hey, let's celebrate. And they have all sorts of events. They do yoga on the grounds. They have a big celebration for the Day of the Dead. Huge weekend celebration. Yes. They have summer movies that they project up on the side of the huge mausoleum. People bring their picnic dinners and their lounge chairs and blankets, and they spread out on the grounds among the mausoleums. Yeah, it's really kind of neat. And
that's interesting. So in that sense, the cemetery comes closer to life. So it's not just a place where you never want to go and never want to be. It's just a place that is there, and there's a relation, and you bring your life and your liveliness to a place where people found their rest that were lively before.
Yes, and it's a type of celebration. I mean, Judy Garland is buried there. Rudolph Valentino, he's buried there with lipstick prints all over his stone. So we do these huge sound baths with 60, 70 people in the cathedral mausoleum in the back. And the sound is amazing because of it just reverberates and echoes throughout the mausoleum. And
so you don't even hear the attacks from when you hit the gong. Oh.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And then I thought, gee, who has bird sounds? No, there's a nest of birds up in the so it's just beautiful. And we do these on full moons. And so when there's a full moon and you have to go to the bathroom, you have to walk through the cemetery in the dark, and you hear the peacocks screaming and there's a million cats. It's just such a cool place. I always take anybody who comes to visit me in LA, I always take them to Hollywood Forever Cemetery because it's such a cool place. But yeah, we do sound healing there, and it's pretty profound stuff.
Wow. I never thought about this, and I never think about going to a cemetery. But now I really have the idea when I come to LA, there's a place to go, especially when there's a full moon. Yes. What I recognize, and the instruments that you mentioned are all metallic instruments, right? So,
there's crystal bowls.
Oh, yeah, right.
Mm-hmm. There's crystal bowls. There's ocean drums, and people are like, what's that? Well, it sounds like an ocean. It's almost like a big tambourine.
Yeah.
And there's all these
some kind of rice or little pearls in it.
Ball bearings, yeah. And so, you kind of move it in a way and you can create ocean sound. And it's funny, Christoph, most people, I say, what was your favorite part of the sound bath? And they're like, oh, that part that sound like the ocean. But I had one gal say to me, that part scared me the most. I said, why? She says, because I have a fear of water.
Wow.
So it's interesting because especially in group settings, you can never tell who feels what. I like to ask, and I tell her, I told that girl, I says, you know what? I said, maybe that's something to work on, your fear of water, and you can do it through using the ocean drum. So she was, oh, I never thought of that. I said, yes, because if you get accustomed to that sound, and we can bring in other pleasant sounds so you can have some kind of reference and yet still hear the ocean, you can learn to find peace in that sound. And so that may help. It's very multi-dimensional sound healing.
Yeah. And if you would explain this to this person, because it's an instrument, it's not the sea. It's just something that resonates or sounds like the sea. And this always also reminds me when I work with teams, and then more in the business setting, I always say I have the hypothesis that the way you listen to music or the way you listen is also the way how you listen to your partner, to your client, to society. And that reminds me a lot. So if there's something special in listening and it has to do with, let's say, earlier experiences, or maybe you just like certain things more or less, you will all, in that sense, let's say, biased, or you have some things resonate with you and others won't. And I think it's not a good or a bad thing. It's just interesting to know that it is, and try to find people where you can listen together.
And everyone's different. Everybody is different. Everybody's unique to what triggers them, what calms them, what diverts their attention, where they can focus. I think sound healing, and I have to say one-on-one sound healing is really, because it's specific to that person. It's just a really great way of not only not only addressing like your stress levels, but you can actually make a lot of profound changes in your emotions with it, which is great. I also encourage my patients, and I also use this in my sound healings group and one-on-ones, is the sound of silence.
Mm.
So, for example, I have these great Tibetan bowls. It's like, I think for me, I resonate, pardon the pun, mostly with those Tibetans, the Tibetan bowls. But when I strike a Tibetan bowl, I really try and allow that frequency to run to its extent. Because it's in that frequency that you find peace. But when that frequency ends and it trails off into the distance, that profound bit of silence afterwards is almost like the period at the end of the sentence. It punctuates the sound, but it allows it to set. And so I find I use a lot of silence after sounds to really, I guess, emphasize the effect of that sound.
Yeah, and sounds don't stop immediately. Sounds die away. So there's always in synthesizers, we always talk about the ADSR, the attack, the decay, the sustain, and the release. So a sound has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then when sounds fade out, then there's that moment where you think, is it still sounding? Or is it silence? And that's very, very relieving.
I'll give you a Beatle reference. So I'm assuming we're pretty familiar with the Beatles music. So on the Sgt. Pepper album, the very last song, A Day in the Life, that last note that they play, which is long and sustaining. I can't tell you how aggravated I get when I hear it on the radio and they just cut the end off.
Yes.
It's so
unbelievable. No patience to listen to the end of songs.
But that note, because I mean, for me, that song is super profound and brings a lot of emotion because I was 7 years old when I heard it. And there was a lot of, I guess, memories and remembrance throughout that time for me. But when I hear that sound, it's the final note of the song and you're feeling the emotion of the song, and then to have it cut off. So I try and listen to the end and then some. Yeah. So it makes it just that much more amazing. Yeah.
That was interesting because Sgt. Pepper, was it the first real studio recording of the Beatles where they brought in a lot of instruments, a lot of experimentation also of the, let's say, the studio as an instrument?
I think George was already playing with the sitar stuff before that. I want to say, I'm not really sure, but I have a feeling because doesn't he play on Norwegian Wood, and wasn't that on Rubber Soul, which was before Sgt. Pepper?
I think so. Also with the sitar, but I mean more there's also orchestra, different instruments, and you also see it on the cover of Sgt. Pepper, where all these influences are. And I think on the top right, the third from the left, is Karl-Heinz Stockhausen. And he was a composer, a modern contemporary composer, and I think there's a reference to him about his work, and I think that's interesting because, that's really for normal pop listeners really far out, but it's a reference on at least a picture reference on the Sgt. Pepper cover.
There's a lot of reference in that Sgt. Pepper cover. Yeah.
Nice.
I even saw a Frank Zappa documentary. Such a genius that man was. God rest his soul. And he did a tongue-in-cheek kind of thing to the Sgt. Pepper album, but his own spin, which was very much fun, in all of Frank Zappa style.
You know the name of the record? It's We're Only in It for the Money.
That's right. We're only in it for the money. That's it.
and it's like dressing up. It's like a persiflage, and I think maybe that's the nicest compliment that you can do, to make a persiflage in your way, but actually you're honoring what they did. Nice.
Yeah, I know that he was a little apprehensive, or the record company was, that maybe that they were going to be sued by the Beatles, but it was like, no, no, not at all.
Maybe they had a big laugh about it.
Maybe, I'm sure. I know he must have, but.
Hey, talking about Beatles, Frank Zappa, and references, you also have your own podcast.
I do.
And can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. It's called Rockin' Healthy Lifestyles. And I have conversations with popular musicians, actors, performing artists, and they talk about their life's ups and downs, career ups and downs, what sparks their creative juices, and how they stay healthy and happy in body, mind, and spirit.
Yeah, nice. So that's also inspiring for let's say non-musicians, for people that have stress in other areas to listen to it. And it's about, that's also the link with rock music, because in the 70s, end of the 70s, you lived in London.
I did, yes, in a very crazy time. It was brief, but it was it was definitely an eye-opener. I had a boyfriend, and he worked at the Marquee Club, the very famous Marquee Club. So he got me a job there, and it was a 1979, 1980. It was I guess I want to say post-punk, but it was definitely punk infiltrated, and
new wave, right? So the first new wave groups.
Right on the crest, but it was over there more so. It was, I guess, a blend of punk and mod. Nobody liked each other, so they were kind of reviving that punk, that, mod and rockers kind of thing from the 60s. But loving music, and coming from America, I just loved it all. I would go to mod night. I would go to, see bands like Chelsea and Soft Boys and Pointed Sticks and all these mod bands would come and play, and so it was a lot of fun. My ex-boyfriend, he also worked for Ian Hunter, lead singer of Mott the Hoople. But at that time, Ian and Mick Ronson were playing together, so I got to go on tour with them.
That's the Mick Ronson from David Bowie?
David Bowie.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm. What a lovely and talented individual.
Yeah.
He was really, and a really good person. I ended up having a nice friendship with him, and I knew his mother.
Very important. So you get the whole context of a person.
Yeah. I never met his sister, though. I know he was close with his sister, but he spoke of her often. So it was nice to be able to be in that mix, and then come back to New York. And I grew up in a time where there was, especially in New York, 76, I was 16, and we were down in the clubs, Max's Kansas City, and CBGB's, of course, Mud Club, the Great Gildersleeves, Club 57, all those clubs where it was, people were making fun of the Ramones at the time. But, and then, of course, we saw the big arena shows at Madison Square Garden, Nassau Coliseum, and I saw Led Zeppelin 5 times, and just all those bands, The Who, when Keith was alive, and of course the Stones a million times. It was just a great, great time. I worked in the music industry for a mastering studio, Masterdisc, had different jobs in the music industry. And so it was a good time.
So Jennifer, you really lived music early on, and when hearing all these bands like Led Zeppelin, Bad Company, or so that's really more heavy stuff, and that's interesting that at a certain moment all of these influences, these sounds, all these frequencies come together in a chiropractic and a sound healing, sound bathing, and still having good remembrance to that kind of music. That's really beautiful to hear.
Well, I think it excites me and it moves me, and has since I'm a little child. I had the exposure, like I said, of my older uncle. So I was really turned on to a lot of music. Growing up in New York, I have just some basic music skills that I went to music school, piano school. But for example, when you're in New York and you're in piano school and you go on trips, you go to places like the Metropolitan Opera House.
Wow.
And so, the I don't know, Hansel and Gretel, that was your outing. So the influence, because of where I grew up, New York, and then later on having the London influence was certainly great. And then coming out to California, and I came out here for my studies, my graduate school studies, and then of course stayed here and I'm in practice. But being out here as well is, and then you have a whole different coast of influence. So it's, and I love classical music because in the mid 80s, I worked for American Ballet Theatre when Mikhail Baryshnikov was artistic director. And so I spent a lot of time as an extra, supernumerary, and extra in the productions, taking care of the kids, both on this West Coast and at the Metropolitan Opera House, and watching the greats dance, Baryshnikov, Nureyev, Natalia Makarova, and all the wonderful ballet companies from around the world. So I love all sorts of music, jazz, and music is a healer. And I was lucky enough to get the opportunity to become regional director of the UROC Foundation. The UROC Foundation is a music-based nonprofit organization that helps people who suffer from anxiety, depression, suicide ideation, and mental health issues. And how we help people is we get popular musicians to do video testimonials about how music has saved their life. So we have band members of Korn, a lot of heavy metal, Gemini Syndrome, Randy Blythe from
Slipknot.
Oh yes, we have Corey Taylor from Slipknot. Yeah. So we have a lot of video testimonials, and these guys and gals, Butcher Babies, they really talk about their difficulties and how music has saved their life. So being regional director of the UROC Foundation and interviewing people, musicians, about their mental health status and how they use music to survive, and doing my podcast, Rockin' Healthy Lifestyles, I'm really kind of integrating that together with the emphasis of how important music is for mental health.
Oh, wow. It's a real life of sound and music and silence. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jennifer. So I think we touched a lot. Thank you for all your insights. And I will put everything in the show notes. We have to all the links. So when people want to find and want to know more about and want to see the videos, this would be great. But if they want to contact you, what would be the best thing to do?
Well, they can go onto my website and contact me there. It's rockinhealthylifestyles.com. That's rock, the letter N, healthylifestyles.com, and reach out to me through the email, or they can follow me on Instagram, Rockin' Healthy Lifestyles, and even on Facebook, Dr. Jen Palladino. And I have a group that I have a bunch of different people who are part of that group. It's called Music Hacks for Mental Health. And we talk about music and how it affects mental health. And we make suggestions and turn each other on to all sorts of great music. So there's many ways to reach out, and I'll be listening.
So Jennifer, Dr. Jen, thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you so much for having me, Crystal. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate this because listening is one of the top leadership skills, and I feel honored about this. It is my mission to find, create, and share inspirations for meaningful collaboration based on music analogies. If you want to support this, please subscribe to the podcast, give us a rating, or write a review on iTunes or Spotify. And more inspirations can be found on musicthinking.com. We have a blog, and you can download the Music Thinking Framework. And finally, I would love to hear your feedback. And if you need help with a business challenge, please reach out to me via email, podcast@musicthinking.com.